Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Writer's Room. I'm your host, Kat Rocha, the night editor, and with me this evening is
J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit.
And William Hastings, author of The Crimson Spark, now available on Amazon.
Okay. And our regular participant, Buddy Lord, he is dead at the moment.
Yeah, that long-standing tradition, and when people are not on the show, that just means they've died.
Yes, they have died.
So Buddy's died once again. It's pretty
Rip
rough.
and pepperoni.
Yes, we need a phoenix down to bring him back. But I think that is very appropriate for this evening's topic, where we are discussing
Dino saucers.
Yes, exactly, dino saucers. No, we are discussing that that eternal question that plagues every writer: how to begin and how to end. So, and as always, those in the chat, please share with us your questions. We will get to you. If we miss you, please post it again. So, first question to Ishi and to William. Well, let's start with the personal question. When you are beginning a writing project, how do you begin?
Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first.
All right, go first.
I think my answer might be a little less interesting than yours, Ishi. When I start writing a book, I usually have an idea of what I want the first scene to look like. But from there, it's something that I just do. I have the setting in mind, and then I just start writing, and everything sort of flows out from there. The first scene is the most improvised scene in the entire book for me, usually. And that's true in Spark. That's true in Embers. That's going to be true in book 3 as well. It's I sort of try to set the mood for the rest of the story, but I also leave it open for my mind to sort of take me in new directions.
Well, for me, the process usually starts with I will have a number of scenes burning in my brain that I want to get out, and I'll have a notebook, and I will write out everything that wants to get out of my head right then and there. And on top of that, then there's all the research that goes along with it. Sometimes the research comes first, sometimes it comes after. But usually after I get all those scenes out of my head, the ones that demand to be written, it gives me an idea of where this story is going to start. And that's usually where I begin to locate my start point. And as I continue to piece the story together, sometimes I'll realize, okay, you know what? These few scenes at the beginning aren't needed anymore. Just cut them off right there. Or I'll realize, no, I need an introduction that sets everything up.
Yeah, I get that. The funny thing is, the one thing that about Spark that really never changed was the first chapter. That was the same since I started it in 2009. For those of you who haven't read it, Spark opens with 2 child slaves on a boat to a new country, and that was sort of my go-to point with the whole book. I didn't actually know what was going to happen in it when I started writing it, so everything came from there. And because of that, the first scene is almost always besides from minutia about specific events, it's always been that one scene. And beginnings are just sort of one of the things that I don't think I really struggle with so much, but I do get the confusion about them, because there's so many different ways to do it, and nobody ever feels like they're doing the right one.
It is nice when the scene that pops into your head that starts the story is the opening scene, and it's right there fully formed. That is always a wonderful experience.
Definitely.
So how do you two work around it when you don't have that experience?
How do I work around it? As I said, I crunch out all the scenes that I have in my mind, and that'll usually tell me where it has to start for the others to occur in sequence.
I almost always have the beginning set in my head, and everything else comes from there. So I don't really know what chapter 2 of book 3 is going to be like, but I definitely know what chapter 1 is going to be. And that's true with all of the books in Vagabond Legacy right now.
I would say another interesting experience for me, because before tackling Machine Child, which is what I'm writing right now, I'd only written short stories and graphic novels. And graphic novels are a completely different art form in themselves. And I have a completely different theory and approach to writing to visual storytelling. So what was interesting with writing Machine Child was when my first chapter hit about 25,000 words, I realized, no, this is the first act.
Yeah.
And had to start chopping it up and realizing, oh, I've got 5 chapters here. So in that sense, it's been a learning experience. As far as writing visual stories, graphic novels, I'm kind of the John Milius school of story writing or visual directing. And John Milius is best known for directing the first Conan movie, Conan the Barbarian. And as he said, you always want to start your story with something that's going to grab the audience and really just pull them into it. And what's better than a massacre of an entire village? Where he said something to that effect. And I took that to heart. And since, unlike novels, you really, in comics, people do not have any patience. Usually with a novel, you can kind of count on a reader to at least read the first few pages. Not so much with a comic book. Often when they're standing in that store, if they don't see something within the first page or two, it goes back. Especially when you're a new title and a genre that they don't particularly would buy on a regular basis, And I've never really done conventional superhero stuff for the most part, other than that one DC project. So for me, every story I've written starts with something shocking or a scene that is going to set the tone and mood for the rest of the story, a mission statement that essentially grabs the reader and pulls them in. World War Kaiju opens with that world's equivalent to the bombing of Hiroshima. And that's when Fat Man, the Godzilla type creature, rises out of the ocean and destroys Tokyo. I started Titanium Rain with a gun battle roving through the streets of China, and just obliterating an old Buddhist temple. I have Case File Arkham 1 open with a couple getting lured down an alleyway and having ghouls massacre them. Case File Arkham 2, I introduce the conflict, the villainous, or the femme fatale, and a whole bunch of concepts in a very, very tense scene where a hitman's come to kill her, and it turns out very differently. But in each case, I wanted to be able to grab that audience within those first 3 pages.
Yeah, I think that's something that's definitely consistent across across both of our approaches and across the mediums, because if you don't get somebody right away, then you're not going to hold them. And that was something that I had to kind of learn as we were going, that there needs to be questions, there needs to be stakes, there needs to be all this stuff right away. Even if it's not a comic, people are going to want to be on board right away and know what's going on.
Well, the trick with novels and short stories is where in comics you need that visual scene that is just going to pull them in. I would say the literary equivalent is you need that first line that is going to make them say, okay, I want to read the whole page and figure out why that's there. That one first sentence that makes them want to read the whole page. Be it a question or an image or what, you've got to have that initial image or that initial hook.
The terror that wouldn't end for another 29 years if it ever did end began, so far as I or anyone else can tell, with a plastic boat made from a sheet of newspaper floating down a gutter swollen with rain. Stephen
When-
King's It is the one that always springs out in my head as the most effective opening sentence, I think, of all time for me.
Actually, that's a great segue to another question I was going to pose, and then we'll get to Corn Pop Cronkins because his question is very good. But
We've got a few good questions
It's a
in
great
here.
name, by the way.
yeah, so
Kronk's
okay.
the man. We got to get him on air.
One of the questions I am asked a lot and repeatedly as the night editor is that first opening sentence. How do you craft that first opening sentence?
Maybe it's because I'm visual and because I really like to play with very dense sentences that create images. Usually I hit them with a hook of a sentence that is both a strong image and a question. And maybe it's not a question as in spoken as a question, but it opens the door to a why is that? So visceral is good.
Tone is important for me, and I think they tell you not to begin with setting or weather, but they can be a powerful tool if you're trying to set up a very specific kind of energy going into the first chapter. I usually start with the scene surrounding the characters and then move inward towards what the characters are doing.
Well, one of the most popular or one of the most impactful and memorable first lines of a novel from the late 20th century was, the sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. There you go, weather, setting.
That is really good. What is that?
Well, that's from Neuromancer.
William Gibson's Neuromancer.
But one of the other rules is you're not supposed to begin with the word "it." Yet, one of the most famous opening lines ever is "It was a dark and stormy night." So,
almost exactly how Opal Ember starts, as a dark and stormy night. And there's something very effective about it because the person who's reading is immediately sort of feeling cozy and intrigued and ready to go on this adventure with you.
So when it comes to opening line, let's have a little fun here. We're going to try something. Can you remember an opening line you may have written that you went, wow, that's total shit, and completely trashed it, but it stayed in your mind because you're like, wow, I can't believe I wrote that.
I may actually have it right here in front of me.
No, either of you.
Oh.
Yeah, that you wrote in one of your things where you wrote that and you went, wow, that's crap, and you scrapped it.
But it was good, or was it crap?
It was crap. We're trying an experiment here.
Shit, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't have anything from my my days of writing in college.
Now, see, this one probably is kind of objectively bad, but I like it, so I'm not going to use that one.
If you like something, my thought is, this is a great way. I mean, we're talking about how to craft good stuff, so it's like, okay, well, what's something that you, as a professional writer, have done that wasn't stellar? I think I know a lot of writers like hearing about things that professionals have done that aren't exactly, their best, or they think are not exactly their best. It helps to give perspective and shows progression, and that, yes, over time you can develop your craft.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see
I
if I can find something here.
Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves for just a second.
Again, well, as far as stuff I'd written, I know there's tons of horrible stuff I wrote, but I don't have any of it. And I really have no memory of it.
It's not something you kept in your brain?
No, not really.
No.
Um, but I can talk about something good I wrote, and
But
that
that's
is,
not the question.
well, let's see, I could lie.
Oh, okay. I got mine. I got mine.
Okay.
The wild Arctic wind screamed as it tore Dr. Bartleby Buchanan's tent clean out of the ground. I'm not fond of that opening because it doesn't establish anything about this story except the weather, and that's generally not a good idea, particularly in a story like this, which is an adventure novel that I never got around to publishing. It's sort of supposed to be this kind of Doc Savage inspired international runaround, and there really isn't any kind of hook to that opening that I resonated with. It's supposed to be this larger than life character, but she's not even in the first sentence, so who cares?
That and there's two subjects that we're supposed to be paying attention to.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
Either one of those would be fine, but I think together it's just kind of front loaded.
How old is this? I don't know who wrote this.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure.
Rust-colored rain fell from the sky like God's own assassination. I was sitting in my office, looking at my bills. I was ready to shoot myself or drink whiskey. I'd have to flip a coin to choose. See, I didn't write bad.
We're reading from my diary on air. Stop that. Which book is that?
I made it up on the spot.
Oh, okay.
I was just bullshitting. I don't know. Look, how about I talk about good stuff? I really can't really mention anything bad because it's not in my head.
Actually, that might be a fun exercise to do at a later date. Is do the was it 5-word stories and have you guys pass it back and forth?
Okay. By the way, I wrote this back in 2014.
Oh wow!
Yeah. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but it's like 6 years now.
It's like, oh crap! It's been that long.
Yeah, Spark was already 6 years old. That's kind of embarrassing.
Well, okay. Ishi has pulled up
Two stories.
Has pulled up a manuscript here, 2 manuscripts here. So, William, I'm going to invite you to do the same and share with the audience your opening sentences for either what you're currently working on, if you feel comfortable, or for Spark. Let's share with the audience what your current works begin like.
Okay, so here's the beginning to a short story, and that is rise and shine, and it's written as kind of a weird digital message. I awake to tiny hands on my face, delicate, clawed, batting at my cheek. And already it pulls you in. What the hell is this?
Yeah, definitely.
Or with Machine Child, the machines were attracted to flesh, to the smell of humanity.
That's really good. I like that a lot, actually.
Thank you.
All right, so the opening of Spark is the ship rocked back and forth in the churning sea, carried up one wave and hurled down upon another, creating a sickening rhythm even in the bowels of the great wooden beast. A beam of rich evening sunlight shone down through the solitary porthole, barely illuminating the ship's hold and the crumpled forms within.
So you're writing high literature here.
Yeah, allegedly. This is just for those of you who haven't read Spark. It opens with a slave ship full of neglected, abused children being brought to this new country, and that was sort of what I was trying to go for in the first paragraph. I was trying to get the broken, crumpled, destroyed imagery of the people and the end of day sort of tiredness of the crew, the rhythm of the ship. It was all very inspired by like old New England paintings, that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're reading that, and immediately I'm taken back to we're reading what, like Kidnapped or Treasure Island, or kind of that era of high adventure storytelling immediately comes to mind. It's
Well,
a
I
style that's
appreciate
not
that.
done much anymore. I applaud you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it wasn't as good as it was before Kat went over it. So
Hey, all I did was help you see, help polish it even more. That's all. If it wasn't good writing, I would have said so. But that brings us to Corn Pop Cronkin's question: would it be redundant to say beginnings begin with world building?
They often should.
I don't think it'd be redundant. No. I think world building is important, but as Kat can attest, I kind of put world building on the back burner for most of the first chapter of Spark to focus in on the characters, and that's something that I did on purpose because the characters are what's going to sell the book for me. Because like there's so much good fantasy out there. I'm not really going to stand out in terms of world building, but character development is what I think I'm pretty good at.
Well, I'm going to show something real quickly about how you can actually very quick use a story. Really, the way I view it is your first line should really, more than anything, get the person interested. And if possible, establish something critical about the scene, the character, or the world. But as you continue on, character will need to come first. And good characterization will, in turn, world build for you. And it'll do it very just by its osmosis, just by being there, just by interacting with your setting, you learn. And to go back to William Gibson's Neuromancer, just as an example, the sky above the port was the color of television, tuned to a dead channel. It's not like I'm using, Case heard someone say, as he shouldered his way around the crowd of the door into the chat. It's like my body's developed this massive drug deficiency. It was a sprawl voice and a sprawl joke. The Chatsuba was a bar for expatriates. You could drink there for a week and never hear 2 words in Japanese. Now, already we know multiple things. We've got tone of the story. We know it's hard-boiled. Second, we know our lead character's name is Case. Third, we've gotten a sense of where it's set. It's clearly in Japan because he says you can be at this, it's for expatriates, and you'll often not hear 2 words in Japanese there. It's so full of expats. You realize there's definitely a gritty drug culture going on. And we know that the environment he's in is called the sprawl. All of these things are established within less than 50 words?
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, you've learned a ton about the character in that just first couple sentences, and a ton about the world by virtue of him talking or observing what he sees as he goes into this bar.
And that's William Gibson, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get his early work. His later work I'm not too thrilled with. But
he's Johnny Mnemonic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a terrible movie, but
that's what I know him for.
His collection, Burning Chrome, is a great selection of his short stories. I think actually he should have just gone back to that after he made his money. But yeah, his Sprawl trilogy, incredibly well written. I learned a lot. It really influenced how I do imagery. And then his Bridge series is really good too, and it's more kind of a down-to-earth, easier read. Should we move to another question?
Oh, I just before.
Oh, I'm sorry, William.
I just wanted to mention that go back to that thing I was quoting earlier. The Stephen King's It, the opening sentence talking about a terror that is haunting people. If it ever went away, maybe it didn't. It's kind of this ambiguous horror, which is very much what the book is about. It's this nebulous, incomprehensible. What does Lovecraft say? Ancient, indescribable evil.
Yeah, indescribable horror.
Yeah, and that's very much what it is about, and the idea of the just calling it the terror and talking about how it begins with something so simple like a little boat floating down a gutter during the rain is so beautiful in its simplicity, but it's like this innocence that is about to give way to this awful, awful horror, which is the entire book essentially.
And going back, just how much that opening conveys to the audience in such short amount of time. Like you said, it's setting up the entire tone of the book, the entire themes of the book, innocence being devoured, something simplistic turning into something horrible. And it is a perfect beginning, I would say.
And funnily enough, Stephen King's favorite opening to a novel is the one you just referenced, Ishi.
Really, Neuromancer?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's kind of a massive compliment to Gibson.
So, sorry about that. But what did you want to?
No. We're looking to see if we can find another question from the audience. If not, I have another question for you too. And I'm going to say, unless Ishi finds something, let's move into the meat of a book. I have had a lot of people ask me, again, ask the night editor, on top of my own experiences going to panels, and that is chapters. The subject of beginning chapters has come up quite a lot. I have listened. Strangely enough, the words of R.L. Stine have stuck with me, where he says that he wrote his stories where the end of a chapter is supposed to be your cliffhanger. It's the thing that draws the audience and forces them to turn that page to continue reading to the next chapter. And then the next chapter is the conclusion of that cliffhanger and leads you back into the build-up, so you get the next cliffhanger at the end of that chapter. So since this talk tonight is beginnings and endings, how do you approach ending chapters and beginning chapters?
Well, beginning chapters often, for me, seem to be around essentially the same theory of beginning a story. You want a line that is going to pull them through the page, that'll make them want to continue reading. And ideally, writing in general, be it writing for comics, writing for film, writing novels, every sentence should in some degree want to make the reader read the next. Every paragraph should make the reader want to read the next. Every chapter should end making the reader want to read the next. You want that forward motion.
Absolutely. I try to end all my chapters on some kind of intrigue or reveal or excitement or revelation, and I think that's been pretty. My chapters are short. My chapters are only about 2,000 words each, and so they come and go very quickly for the readers. So if there's this fast reveal, come down, come back up sort of rhythm to it, it gets them reading longer. And because of that, I've had people tell me that they read Spark for very long periods of time at once. It's not really a book that they pick up and read a chapter of every week or so. It's usually something they get invested in for a few hours.
Then you did your job right.
Guess so.
That's the best compliment you can get.
Mm.
A lot of people will. You can often have people tell you your writing's very good, very visual, very compelling, but at the end of the day, the best compliment is, "I couldn't put it down."
Always. Like, you don't even have to be good to get that compliment.
Yeah, that's true though. I mean, yeah, I suppose that's could be claimed of plenty of romance novels for the audience.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of an unspoken rule of film. It doesn't have to be high art. As long as it's entertaining, people will enjoy it.
Do you see chapters as scenes, and therefore the beginning and end of each chapter as the beginning and end of a scene?
I don't, but I'm still getting a feel for this. There seems to be more. The way that I've been approaching chapters is not a scene per se, but rather when I feel like those connections or the thematic idea that's all related kind of peters out and goes to the next subject.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule I had always read is you want your chapters to be roughly 5,000 words. And when I realized, really you shouldn't have a 25,000 word chapter one, I went through and I started looking around the 5,000 word point, and God damn it, if it wasn't, there's the idea change. There's the thematic change. That's where it shifts gears. And after a while, it was very easy to find where the break should be. And God damn, there was the hook waiting to start the next chapter right there in the prose. So, I mean, maybe that's just the way the human mind functions.
And they say that each chapter represents a little story unto itself with the same arc as a fully fledged novel or comic or anything like that. It has to have like the rise, the climax, and the denouement. And obviously, you can play with that formula a little bit, but if you treat each chapter as its own individual entity, they can really, really start to stand out and draw people in.
Yeah, I mean, that's another nice thing about the chapter format is what if you severely need to change gears in tone? That you really should have the chapter break happen. Otherwise, it's going to seem really awkward.
Yeah, especially in a story that goes back and forth between tone very quickly.
I mean, have you ever seen episodic TV where they decided to edit it together into one long movie and cut out the chapter breaks? Or the
we were just talking about
weird.
We were just talking about Stephen King's It. They did that with the first adaptation.
Good point. Very good point. And did it come off weird?
Yes, it did come off weird. But it came off weird as in it came off kind of similar to the way a novel goes, where it was too long and kind of confusing. But I don't think that was on purpose. I definitely I see why they did it. It just the episodic TV format really only works if you commit to it. And when something's already episodic in chapters, like Stephen King's It is, and it does a lot of it's sort of a weird case because it does a lot of time jumping back and forth. So it's maybe not the best choice for that kind of adaptation. But I do know what you mean. Yeah.
Corn Pop Cronkins, asks, how many pages to 2,000 words?
Now, this really is not typically, this really doesn't relate to what we're talking about, but I felt this should be answered for a different reason. As Durkin answers, it's roughly 270 words per page. But keep in mind right now, a very large amount of your readers are reading it digitally, and there is no standard page length anymore. It has everything to do with how big they decided to magnify the text.
Right. So
it's not even worth thinking about in those terms anymore. It's more like how many words per story.
Mm-hmm. Digital really did kind of erase the whole pages. When I was writing Spark for the longest time, everybody was like, oh, how many pages is it? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, the better answer is how many words.
Yeah.
It's really how we're all talking about them now.
Well, actually, let's go ahead and ask a question based on that because it is a great topic. With the digital age, people reading digitally, has that changed how you approach your writing?
Yeah. it made me decide I could write novels. Um, I went into comics because I love comics. That really was just what I wanted to do at the time, and I'm very glad for that choice. Um, but at the same time, I've written a number of short stories. But the more and more that I looked at the literary world, we think that comics are failing to innovate and failing to change with the time. No, no, the book publishing industry is still operating from a mindset of 1940, if
Mhm.
not earlier. And that's one of the reasons they're losing so much money is they've not really adapted to how people read books. And seeing how books were sold, packaged, the requirements upon the author, I looked at it and said, there is no way I would work with a mainstream publisher. I would want to self-publish. It was so convoluted and ridiculous. Now that most people, and I mean, I would say an incredibly large number of people are all going digital, it's changed the landscape massively. One, book length is whatever the hell you want it to be, as short or as long as you want it to be. Just price it accordingly. I mean, do not publish a novella and expect to get, $8 for it. That it really comes down to that. Also, as we discussed actually before we went on air, um, a lot of people are preferring shorter novels in installments, and that a lot of writers are no longer writing their George R.R. Martin epics. Instead, they're breaking it down into, I'll release the first act as a novel, the second act as a novel, and the third act as a novel, and each one will come out at about 6 months apart. And one that is actually more profitable for the author, but for some reason it seems that readers prefer it too. To know, okay, well, I only have to read 100,000 words and then I can move on, and the next one will come out in a few months.
Right. And, that's this sort of episodic format that digital media really, really favors. We saw it sort of try to take root, not really successfully with video games back
Yeah.
in like the 2007, 2009 times where you would have, these shorter games for lower prices that would come out in episodes. And it didn't really click with games because I don't really know. I don't understand video games very well. But, it's something that we've seen in a lot of different formats. That's basically, what comics have been doing for years. That's what manga does. And it's something that I think a lot of indie authors have really taken to heart and have sort of paved the way for this whole new market. It's very exciting.
Another nice thing about digital, and this again is going back to one of the reasons I wanted to dive into writing novels finally. Um, Digital has brought back the art form of the short story, which had almost completely died out. And I honestly love short stories or long form short stories and novellas. That was another one that nearly died, was the novella. Now the novella is almost the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to really like the old form, like short stories, the really famous kind that you read for school and stuff. But like whenever somebody would say like, "Oh, here's this," you know, this book, it's short stories, I would just kind of like roll my eyes and not be interested. But now, these novellas, like these 150 page books, they're really, really blowing up. And I think it's very cool. It's very much a return to sort of the old pulpy formats.
Yeah. Yeah. Pulp's made a return because of it. One of the things that really bugged me about a lot of novels I was reading, naturally, if you're going to write, you need to read a lot. And one thing that often drove me nuts about a lot of novels I read is you'd be reading it, it'd be on this great clip, and then bam, you would hit filler. And it's like, this is strictly in there because they had to hit a word length. And the beauty of the novella returning is you're getting only what matters. That the novelist doesn't have to, pad it out, which I felt always hurt stories, especially if it's an action or a horror story. You don't want to slow the action down.
It was something prevalent in fantasy for a really long time. Everybody makes those jokes about Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Is like, oh, we're going to sell your book in airports. Well, okay. make sure that we're not going to put numbers on it. So just make sure that every single sentence catches everybody up with everything that's happened in all 25 of these books all at once.
I don't know how those people write those books. It's beyond me.
I couldn't read them, honestly. I tried reading the first book and did not get past the first chapter.
No,
Yeah,
how the hell do you
for a
stop
fantasy
that?
author, but I've never been a big Wheel of Time fan either. I'm much more into David Farland more than Robert Jordan. I like David Farland a whole lot because his is much more punchy, I guess would be the word. Succinct would be another good word.
Oh, I got to introduce you to Christopher Rowley then. Basil Broketail is one of my all-time favorite series.
Yeah, Rowley's good.
Yeah, it is the only it is the only fantasy series I've ever read that did not read like a fantasy series. It read like a you are in the thick of it, in the trenches war story.
That sounds really cool, actually.
And it just happens to have dragons.
Oh, well, it's one of the few. I really just I can't get into fantasy. It's just never really been my genre. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't click with me. I'll read Basil Broketail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is amazing. Anyway, Corvo AZ asked, have you encountered a plot twist that made you go, impossible?
Have you, Kat?
You really want to get me on that rant?
Oh, crap. Sorry. Before we answer this, one more thing.
Yes.
About over description. One of the best novels of all time, Dune by Frank Herbert, explains nothing.
I know.
You are literally left to put this world together by yourself, like a Lego set, and it is one of the most incredible experiences. And in fact, whenever I tell people to read Dune, I recommend that they tear the glossary out the back because I think that's cheating. Putting together what this world is and how it works, one of the most incredible things about that story is that you go in blind, not knowing anything about it.
I really liked the way Dune was written. My only complaint is I do wish he'd been a little more descriptive. But, he was a journalist. He wrote like a journalist.
Yeah, definitely.
And see, I had David Lynch's Dune is one of my mom's favorite films. So,
you got to see the cable version, which is 4 hours.
Yeah,
there's a 4-hour version of that movie, and I don't own it.
Yes,
it's sad because this is way off topic. It's sad because if you watch the 4-hour version, which isn't really complete, you see what the film could have been. It could have been a really amazing epic.
For one thing, there are little scenes of just, Gurney playing his balisette for one, just simple little scenes.
Lots of stuff that didn't make any sense in the film cut.
Yeah, that suddenly it's like, oh, that's what that was. But I grew up watching that. So when, as a bedtime story, my mom broke out Dune and was like, okay, we're going to read this. I had all those things in my head. So
you are a child of advantage, Kat. You got to read Dune and Xanth so early.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of odd that way.
Okay, so things that I said impossible too.
Yeah, what plot twists?
Plot twists.
But
is it okay if we spoil the book?
I'm okay with it. If the audience, we're going to be spoiling things, and yes, I'm probably going to go in a rant when it's my turn because I have a book.
I have to go get my Kindle so I can get the name.
I got one. Jumps right away for me.
Yes.
There's two. There's two really good ones for me, and the first one is D.M. Cornish. D.M. Cornish is an Australian YA novelist who wrote what is now referred to as the Half Continent series, the Foundling trilogy. But when it was published, it was called Monster Blood Tattoo, which I think is a much cooler name. And
Monster Blood Tattoo. Wow.
Monster Blood Tattoo. Yeah. And it's this it's like a Western fantasy novel about a JRPG. It's incredible. And the protagonist of the story is this he's a lot like Leo in my story. He's this sort of quiet, introverted little boy with a girl's name and a girl's haircut. And he's just not very good at anything. And as the story goes on, we find out we start to notice a few unusual things about him. He lives in this world where monsters are hunted and people live sort of in constant warfare with these wandering monsters. It's very much like the game Monster Hunter.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, except it's Victorian. It's Monster Hunter but Victorian. There's guns and people with lightning powers. It's a great, really well realized story. But as we go through it, the main character, Rosamund is his name, starts to he starts to become more and more competent, and we start to notice things about him that we didn't before. And the high point is when he saves one of his friends by catching something that is too heavy for a normal person to catch. And as the story goes on, we discover that Rosamund himself is a monster that looks like a human. Sort of infiltrated their culture, like a cuckoo bird.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I like that twist a lot, and it really makes the series rereadable.
See, that's cool.
Yeah, and Cornish, if you can find anything by D.M. Cornish, read it, because he wrote Monster Blood Tattoo, and then he disappeared, and nobody's heard from him since, and I miss him so much, and I really want him to come back. But he had some depression and stuff issues, but
poor guy.
if he's if he ever hears this, wishing you the best. You're a huge inspiration on me, and that is one of my favorite twists. Is Finney back, or should I go into the next one?
I'm back.
All right.
Okay, so I read a book by Edward Ashton called 3 Days in April, and I would say the first act of the book is great. It is incredibly well written, very catchy dialogue. Just the whole thing comes off is very believable, and it's set probably about 20 years in the future in Boston, and it's a world where there are quite a few cybernetic and biologically engineered, biologically altered people living side by side with normal people. And at first, you get this real kind of lived-in sense of just people going about their lives and just how this would affect society. And that was really nice. And then the plot starts up where this bizarre terrorist incident happens, but only people who are altered die. And as the plot continued, the second act, it starts to fall off. And by the third act, it was just like, really? Seriously? And really the problem with it is first off, the terrorist act happens. And nobody can figure out how the hell this happened. How could you engineer a virus that only hurts biologically engineered and cybernetic people? That doesn't work. How do you make a virus that does that? And out of nowhere, while everyone's sitting around the table discussing this, they pull out this drink that's it's like nano something or other. It's better than caffeine. It has nanites in it that makes you alert.
Nano machines.
And they're all, isn't there a factory right next to where an incident happened? It's like, seriously, you just ruined the whole fucking story. This is not some big twist when it happens later in the book. I mean, you just like put a giant shining, neon sign that said, "The soda is how it happened."
You can actually hear the characters getting shot in the head with Chekhov's gun.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, if that had been left out, the story would have been so much better. But also, the story proceeds. Our character, who's just a teacher or a student, an assistant teacher at a university trying to get tenure, just happens to know people. Every person in his life just happens to either be involved in the conspiracy or have the right connections or the right skills, and all happen to be in the right place at the right time, including some waitress that he just meets by accident one night. Turns out to be actually a deep cover CIA agent who's helping them. It went from being a very down-to-earth, believable, these are normal people who just happen to have alterations, dealing with a horribly world-changing incident, to just downright, this needs to happen now in the plot. Well, I don't know how I'm going to get around this yet, so how about this?
That sounds frustrating.
William, did you want to do your second story,
Yeah,
or shall I
I
do
actually
mine?
have. I have two other big ones that really resonate with me that I always like to talk about, and they're from completely different ends of the spectrum in terms of storytelling. Because one of them is very very hopeful and inspiring and a really cool, exciting twist when it happens, and the other one is the most despair-inducing thing that I've ever encountered. And they both work for different reasons, I think. And
Okay.
the hopeful one is from the Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCafferty, specifically the first one, Dragonflight. Throughout Dragon Riders of Pern, it's said that the Dragon Riders disappeared and nobody knows where they went. And at the very, very end, we find out that they went. The protagonist brought. You're gonna hate this, Cat. The protagonist went back in time and then
No,
brought them.
actually, I attempted to read that series. I tried reading 3 different books from that series, and I just could not get into it. But I am very well aware of all the plot points, so it's all
Yeah.
good.
So she went back in time and she brought all the Dragon Riders to the present to win the big battle for them. So in doing this sort of she in doingly caused like the 50 years of despair, but she also saves everybody in the end. So it's kind of an interesting play on the because the dragons in the Pern series, they can teleport around. It's pretty cool. And Corn Pop Cronkins, do not ever recommend that anyone read the Dragon Riders of Pern in order. That is a nightmare and a recipe for disaster. Even the author was like, no, just read them in the published order and then piece it together later, because it's just incomprehensible and they don't have any numbers or anything like that.
I for again, I couldn't get into the series, but from everything that I've heard, I agree.
And it's not for everybody. The only one I really really like is the first one. So
I think another one that was just like, I don't buy it. No, I don't buy it. Was there was this giant squid that appeared in New York and caused world peace.
I thought, now okay, now here's a real controversial take.
The movie ending did make more sense.
The movie ending made more sense. Okay, thank you. I'm glad we have the same opinion. Snyder actually fixed that, I think.
Wow. I agree, but it's just it's a wow factor to say Snyder fixed it. Just that's an oh my god, impossible type of thing. Okay, I gotta share this real quick. This is not the first time I will go on this rant. This will not be the last. If you want to check out this book, it's up to you. I don't remember the author, but the title of the book is Soulstorm.
Oh, I've not heard this story.
You probably have, because like I said, I will rant about this book many a time. I picked up this book because you looked it up. Oh my god, is that really the? Oh, okay. The author Ishii is a sick bastard, and actually looked up the author's name. His name is Chet Williamson.
Fake name.
Yeah, it totally. And okay, whether he wrote this for money or he wrote this because he was serious, I don't care. You want the impossible moments. This book has 2 of them for me. I picked up this book because Hell House is one of my absolute favorite books of all times. There was a period in my life where I was reading it once, if not twice a year. That's how much I love this book from Richard Matheson.
My man.
And I desperately wanted more horror in that vein. I had read Shirley Jackson. Okay.
Put that on the back of the book there. Shirley Jackson. Okay.
But I love haunted house stories, and I picked this book up because I just wanted a fun haunted house story. I wasn't looking for Matheson. I just wanted something fun. And for the first half of it, it really did have the same vibe as House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price.
One of the best old movies, and it's public domain, so you guys can all check it out.
Oh yeah, totally. And it had that vibe. And I thought, this is great. You know, you've got your group of paranormal investigators, and they're going to this old house, and they're going to spend several nights there, to see if they can find ghosts. And yes, of course, they find ghosts, and ghostly hauntingness ensues.
Ghostly hauntingness. Is that an actual word?
Yes. Yes, it is. I am deeming it so. I'm an editor, God damn it. I know it's a word. And then came the first impossible moment, when the haunted house cured the gayness of one of the characters.
Is that how that works?
Apparently.
I've just got to do that. There's like a million haunted houses around. How have I never thought of that? Oh my God.
And he goes and makes wild, passionate love to the main female protagonist in the book, who up until that moment he had been kind of ignoring.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then, spoiler alert, you find that this house is like in Ghostbusters 2, where all of the ghosts and all of the haunting activity is being drawn to the museum at the end. It's like that with the house. So it's being turned into this giant battery gestalt of dead people.
Evil.
But the impossible moment is when it is revealed that this is all a plot to take over the world by none other than Mussolini and Hitler.
Bum, bum, bum.
Okay, so I know you're trying to make it sound silly, but everything that you're saying right now makes me want to read this book.
That's why I said read it if you want. I'm not saying it's an endorsement or a stay away.
Oh, sometimes you want to read a bad book.
Yeah, this book is just, the first half of it is like, okay, this is a good haunting. And then you go, what the fuck? And that was the thing, is that what kept me reading was just the number of what the fuck moments in this book. I'm just telling you 2 of them. Okay.
Sometimes you just got to Google up the Tyrannosaurus Rex romance novel and read it.
So there's
That's amazing. What did you say it's called? Soulstorm?
Soulstorm.
I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah,
if any of you young people in the audience are struggling with latent homosexuality, may I recommend taking a trip to any of these old haunted places in America and just getting the gay spooked out of you.
No, just go in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland.
All right. So,
oh my God.
We are approaching the hour, and I like to keep these an hour long.
So why?
Before we finish, can I just do one real quick?
Yes.
Okay. And this is one that's pretty much pretty well known, but I still like to bring it up because it's very important in that it is the most depressing twist I think of all time, and it makes the book for me. And that's the twist at the end of Metro 2033.
Oh God.
So for those of you who haven't read, Metro 2033 is about a bunch of people living in the Moscow underground, struggling to survive. It's very sad, post-apocalyptic Eastern European. It's really miserable. Recommend. It's very good. Go read it.
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and throughout the book, the main hero, Artyom, is trying to protect his village from getting attacked by space aliens. And at the very end, he destroys all of the space aliens.
Well, they're not space aliens. In fact, he keeps describing them more as nightmare creatures, but then we find out what they really are.
Right. And at the very, 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 very end, right before he destroys them, one of them communicates with him, and he realizes that they are in fact not evil. They're not trying to destroy his people. In fact, they're trying to save all of his people. And
I totally didn't buy that.
The last hope of humanity to come back to the surface, to survive, to be reborn, this new golden age of humanity, Artyom has already pushed the button to destroy it. And that always really resonated with me. I know, Ishi, you may find that a little insulting to your people, the aliens. But yeah, that one from Eastern European just depressing storytelling, I think that one really stands out.
I had mixed feelings about the ending. I mean, I understood why it ended that way, and it's a Russian story. Of course, it's going to have a dark ending.
Yeah,
Name me one that doesn't.
Russian stories don't have happy endings, you know.
just like in real life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just felt like it was a little rushed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. And if you're gonna go read the sequels, I would not recommend that. The sequels, like they're not terrible. They're just I didn't care for them, and I feel like the first one is pretty well self-contained.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I really wish, because on the one end, the way that he introduced it at the last minute, I realized he didn't quite have the way. Do you know how it was written?
Like, no, I don't actually.
This is why I think it seemed so sudden, because it felt like he should have seeded it through the story. And I really felt there should have been more clues to what it really was. Because at the beginning, they really do seem like you're not even sure if they're supernatural or not. And throughout the entire story, I really liked that it had this back and forth pacing of 1 minute you think, well, maybe it was a biblical apocalypse.
Yeah. For a long time, they mixed sort of fantasy and science fiction there.
And then suddenly you'd have someone show up and debunk it all and say, it was, no, we just got nuked. And you really started to wonder, well, what really was real? And nobody really seemed to understand. And you got this sense of what it was like to be living in subway tunnels.
In ignorance and isolation, yeah.
Yeah, and they have no idea of what really happened in history and what really is going on above. And I loved that. And I feel like if he'd only seeded in a little bit more what the nightmare creatures were, the dark ones were, really, it would have all been fine. Because I kind of wonder if that ending, he wasn't even sure, and he just decided that was it at the end.
At the beginning,
because listeners know there's even like a cult, a satanic cult in the subways trying to dig a hole to hell.
Yeah, and at the beginning, one of the characters straight up says that the Dark Ones are the next stage of human evolution. He pulls a Magneto. He says that they're they've come to replace us.
You know what? You're right. Maybe I'm being too harsh then. Yeah, I guess he did seed it.
Well, I think what it was throughout the whole book, you're given different people's perspectives and different people's ideas of what the Dark Ones are. And so you're never really 100% sure who's telling the truth and who's not, who actually knows, and who's just spreading rumor or paranoia or superstition.
And when he finally goes to the surface and encounters a dark one in the library.
Librarians, that's the best scene in the whole book.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, there are very few books that have actually affected me and kind of creeped me out. That one did. That scene got me.
There is, that scene with the talking.
Yeah.
Oh my God! For those of you who probably are just like in the comments, like, oh,
you know what, William, I'm going to take that back. I think you're right. The ending was fine. I'm being a hard ass about it. You're right. He did seed at the beginning that what they might be something other than what we think.
No, my only criticism about that book is since it was written as blog entries.
Well, that's what I was going to get into. Is I found out that the way that book was written was that I forget his name.
Russian name. It's hard.
Yeah. He was a journalist. He was well-traveled, which is why he seemed to understand foreign cultures so well. But he was writing this on his free time on the internet and just posting them for free as chapters.
It's the original creepypasta.
Yeah, and it just took off and got a publishing deal, and it just went from there. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, if it reads episodically and it jumps around a little strangely, that's because that's actually how it was written.
Exactly, yeah.
Jumping around, I just thought there were some parts that dragged. That it's like it's like the plot derailed for a short time.
Derailed.
Yes.
Because it's the
I know.
subway.
Yeah, haha.
But yeah, I would recommend if you guys like post-apocalyptic fiction and want to read something that isn't the standard same rehash that we're getting, Metro 2033 is well worth a read.
And if you like video games, there's a real solid adaptation of the first book, and then there's some sequels to it.
They're all good.
Yeah,
all the games are good.
They're all very good.
The second one was really good.
Mhm.
I haven't played the third one quite yet.
third one is a good game, but it kind of ruins the whole plot because you find out people are living on the surface. And
Well, they
It's not-
even in the novel, they kept hinting that there might be people, but you don't know.
but it's like right down the way. Like they take
Oh,
a
is
train
it?
across Russia, and there's like cities full of people, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it kind of renders everything else like meaningless, I think.
Eloise asks again, what's the name of this book?
Metro 2033.
Okay.
Yeah, highly recommended. A little depressing, but you know what Eastern European book isn't.
It is Russian. It's going to be depressing.
He's Russian. You want to shoot self.
You want to shoot something.
Everyone is hungry. There is no money.
Yeah. Although I found that with Anna Karenina and Crime and Punishment, I didn't get depressed for the reasons why other people did. So I don't know. I mean, it still was a downer, but I didn't get the same thing out of it as other people.
Oh, by the way, to the listeners, as I've mentioned in the past, if you're a regular listener, Kat and I have kind of developed the shorthand language that at some point we need to publish a lexicon of what it is. So we talk, we speak to each other, and there's shorthand for what's wrong with a story. And the one where you said where you hit the point in the plot where you say in prosabru,
Yeah, impossible.
we call that tipping the goofy meter, where
Yeah.
the book hits a point where it's so stupid or it's just tipped to the goofy meter, you can't read it anymore.
Yeah, I get that. I have encountered stories that have done that.
And I don't know if you'd like to join us for this, William, but we've been discussing possibly doing a reading club.
Yeah.
Where we would read a book chapter by chapter and then discuss it on air. And we were thinking of switching off where it would be one good book, then an awful book, a good book, and an awful book.
That actually sounds really interesting.
And the awful book would be we could read it till it tipped the goofy meter and we couldn't deal with it anymore.
Okay, but I'm not reading any Tyrannosaurus romance novel.
Oh, come on.
No, actually, we were thinking there apparently is an entire genre of cyborg romance.
He's not kidding.
We were thinking about doing one of those about cyborg space pirates stealing women.
At my local bookstore, we actually have an Amish romance section.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's really wholesome.
Wow. What? Ooh, I saw her ankle. Like that.
Yeah, no, it's like I really want to settle down with this kind and stable gentleman. Okay, I will.
What, there's no love triangles?
I mean, there are, but it's like, yeah, you know, it's I don't know. I didn't
Imagine
read
the
it.
language in it. Yes.
Oh my God.
He looked at her and it really raised his barn.
You're not going to get impalement upon turgid staffs in this, right?
No, I'm afraid not. I think this is written not by Amish people, but with a very religious mindset.
You know, there's also an entire genre of post-apocalyptic Amish and future sci-fi futuristic society Amish.
It's pretty
There's
cool.
Amish in space as well.
I don't know how Amish in space works, but post-apocalyptic Amish, I can totally see that.
That's kind of what Metro 2033 is.
Yeah. Okay, so one final question. I think it's the perfect question to end the evening on, since we are discussing beginnings and endings. How do you end your books?
Go first.
Okay. Well, I had to be taught how to end a book properly because I stop about 5 chapters before appropriate. Like if it was up to me, I would have the climax of the book and then just stop and come back in a year. But you know, you Kat worked with me to help develop sort of the process of writing denouements, and I got better at it as we went. So Spark does have an actual payoff to the climax now. So, but I used to just stop things when the action was over.
That's actually not an uncommon thing, though. A lot of people, they once they've reached that point where they have it in their head, they're like, "Okay, I'm done," and it's like, "No, you need to wrap it all up in a bow." So that's not
Yeah,
an uncommon thing.
I would do the Final Fantasy VII thing where there would be the big final battle and then just cut to black credits.
For me, I had always been of the mindset is you should know what your ending's going to be so you can write towards it. But over time, I found whatever my ending had been when I approached it usually just goes up in smoke by the time I get there, once the journey's over. Um, and with my short stories, it's always been okay, this is where it's done. It feels done. This is the moment it should end.
Yeah, short stories have the benefit that you don't actually really need any closure.
Yeah. Or you feel like the what matters is over and you give the readers a sense of what the possibility of tomorrow may be. You're done. For Case File Arkham, really in both of them, since they're PI noir, it's what's the mystery. So in that sense, I always had how is the mystery going to be solved, and that was kind of a new format for me to be writing in. What I found interesting about it was both times I wrote them, once the mystery was over, I realized the story wasn't.
Huh.
There still needed to be an ending. And ironically, I really wasn't expecting it. Usually these PI stories end kind of dark. In both endings, it just out of nowhere, kind of a somewhat happy ending just pops up. And there's usually just a page or two where it just puts kind of a little ending nod to saying, okay, we're done with this. And there's kind of a ray of sunlight at the end of all this hell, which is kind of been nice considering so much of my stuff's dark, and especially those stories are pretty heady stuff. I mean, there's some really dark places those stories go. So to end it always with, well, after all that hell, Hank, you've got something good waiting for you at home.
I like that. That's definitely a good note to end on.
Yeah.
So the antithesis of Russian literature.
Yeah. Well, I'm an American. I guess it's the benefit of being an American, right?
Amongst other things, yeah.
American stories don't end with everyone killing themselves or starving.
Thankfully.
So, any ending thoughts for our listening audience today?
Absolutely. I'm J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit. And once you're done listening to this, I want you to go over to Amazon.com and order one of my fine graphic novels, be it Case File Arkham, which is Lovecraftian noir set in the 1940s, World War Kaiju, which is a retelling of the Cold War with giant kaiju monsters instead of missiles, or Utopiates, my cyberpunk epic.
I am William Hastings, and after this podcast is over, I would like you to also go over to Amazon and purchase Soulstorm by.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not, but if you're going to buy Soulstorm, also buy The Crimson Spark by William Hastings, the dark fantasy coming of age epic that has been enjoyed and read by quite a few people now. It's only been out for a few months, but people are digging it, and it's my first book, so check it out if you like that kind of thing.
Definitely. And I am once again your host, Kat Rocha, the Night Editor. You can find me at nighteditor.com, where you can find the books that I've edited, including Whispers from the Abyss, Volumes 1 and 2, Lovecraftian horror that will carry you through your daily commute. And you'll also find links to this and the other Writer's Room episodes, so you can catch up if you've missed any episodes. And hopefully, Mr. Lord will be resurrected from the dead next week to join us. So I want to thank you very much, J.Ishiro Finney. Thank you very much, William Hastings. Thank you all very much in the chat for joining us this evening. And
in loving memory of Buddy.
Yeah, in loving memory of Buddy, all of you stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.